So in this video, we're going to start painting the skin tone for our character. Now, at first glance, it might appear that skin tone is consistent and one color throughout, and that is not the case. That it definitely changes throughout the different regions, and depending on the skin tone or skin type, there's certain rules that you can follow. Like someone with lighter skin, the face you can break up into regions, and this doesn't apply for all skin types. Again, this is just mostly for lighter skin, but the top of the head tends to be more of a yellow, the center tends to be more of a pinkish red, and the bottom tends to be more of like this grayish blue. Now, it's one thing to note too when you're looking at photographic reference that shading can be misleading. That how this lighting kind of comes in on this portrait on the right, it's hard to tell what the actual skin tone is because of all the harsh shadows and how much it differs with the light source. Now, one thing that can be helpful is a polarized portrait. And it's these portraits that are taken using technology that kind of mitigates these shadows and these harsh reflections to really get a chance at understanding of what this base skin tone color should look like. And one last thing to keep in mind is that skin is not opaque, it's translucent, that there's some kind of underlying um, tone in the skin from your blood and your organs that kind of add an additional layer to your skin as well. So that's something to consider as well. So let's get started. So I'll just start off with a base tone on my skin. And again, I'm going to do an image texture. I'll do a new texture, 2040 by 8. We'll just call this one skin tone. And yep, 2048 by 2048 is fine. Unless I want to do something, a little bit higher def, feel free to do 4096 if you want. And then I'm just going to pick just a decent middle ground texture. And I could, change this later as I see fit. And that looks like a decent start. And then again, pull up your reference. Any reference you got, the more the better. And again, kind of keep mindful of time. And then I'm going to switch over to my texture paint, which should be already UV unmapped like we've done before. And then go ahead and select report shading mode. And then go ahead and select your colors. And then what I like to do is I like to start off with my strength toned down quite a bit. So then I can really lean into some of this extreme painting. And then I'm going to switch from paint hard to paint soft. And then I do a little bit test panel. Maybe that's too high. Maybe I'll turn down my strength again. And then I might even turn down my multi-res just to speed things up too. If I want, I can always switch it back. And again, I'll switch to maybe something a little bit more in the pink variety for the center of the face. And then even areas in the face tend to have different levels of redness, like the nose and under the eyes. Even the ears can have some red tones in there as well. And again, like looking at some of these polarized portraits, that lighting does a lot to kind of really add our color and our definition for our skin tone. And then I'm going to also layer in the baked textures as well. And Typically your lips, again, are a little bit more red. Since my character's lips are kind of hidden, a little bit older, probably less so than yours. I might do a little bit of red and then also like a little bit of that blue-gray around the eyes as well. And again, like using reference will really help you kind of understand, pay attention to these subtle color shifts and really what it's doing. But kind of using this base of like yellow and pink and gray to really understand and act as a starting point. And then the top of the head too, I'll throw some of this gray down. All right, so I might still kind of play around with these colors, but let's add the subsurface in the shading just to kind of show you what that looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this weight and I'm going to crank it up to about 1. And you can kind of play around with these values on here to see what kind of works best for you. You can also drop the scale down. That still feels a little too heavy. You kind of play around, maybe that's too low. So you kind of get some values that are starting to feel like more believable skin. Maybe that's a little too, like a red in between. That's not too terrible. All right. So let's also look at using our shading as well, just to kind of add these extra layers to show you how those will kind of play into our other resolution. So there's different ways we can do this. And again, we can always drop these into our normal maps as bumps, but let's just add them in to help highlight our shading. I'm going to do that with a mix node. And let's look at, and you can play around how you want these to mix. At the top be the color, and the bottom, let's try soft white. I might change this too. And you can kind of continue to add these as you see fit. I also have my mid, and we'll do the same thing here. We'll plug this into the color. We'll add our other layer. Kind of draw out some more of these. Push it a little bit further. And then let's try our final. Maybe that was a little too, we might back that last one down a little bit. And maybe increase my subsurface again. And we're looking pretty decent even before adding any kind of hair. I do kind of want to see what it looks like if I drop down my levels, how much of this detail I actually lose. Now what I'll do is let's go ahead and split this. Just on an example of one of them, I'm going to add a color ramp in this. And this is going to allow me to change the black and white values. So then I can, ramp. And then I can kind of make this a little bit more extreme. You can kind of see more of how these are going to fit. And if you wanted to do it a step further, you can always turn this into a bump and add that into your normal as well. And then just increase this distance. Let's try. You can slowly increase this distance as well to add a little bit more detail. on your lower resolutions. I don't want to push it too far to the uncanny valley, but just to kind of give you an idea of how far you can kind of push it. And then even with just one of my utility textures on, it looks pretty decent. So if I'll zoom in and kind of show you again, I have a skin detail coming in to a color ramp that mixes with my skin tone. And then I also added a bump map on top of that and even pushed it a little bit further and you get face. And then I'll drop just a placeholder eye texture in there for now. I should probably adjust it a little bit further, but just want to give you an idea. Even at, again, with my subdivision level at 1 and kind of adding that big texture over the top of my skin tone, it gives me some pretty nice details even at a lower resolution.